I'm David Austin, host of the Underground Subway, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Underground Subway podcast, a podcast that is dedicated to giving you, my friends, the tools and strategies needed to live a better, more successful, a life that is liberated, a life that gives you the freedom and liberty to live a better life, a life that gives you the freedom to enjoy life to its fullest. This podcast is based on the name is based on the fact that my grandmother happened to be first cousins with the late great Harriet Tubman. And one of the famous things that Harriet Tubman said that has really been so profound in my life is she said that I could have freed a lot more slaves if only they knew that they were slaves. That triggered something in me to start to realize that maybe there are a lot of people in this world who are walking around in bondage in life and don't realize that there are things that are holding us back. We don't realize it. This podcast is dedicated to exposing and revealing those things that will make us better. And so, what we do is we bring quality and qualified guests on in certain areas of life who will talk about their area of expertise, who will reveal to us the things that will help us to be better, that will say, you may be in bondage in this area, and this is how you can break those shackles. And so I am so super excited to have my guest for this edition of the Underground Subway with us today. He is Dr. Fred Moss. And if any of you know me, I work at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in the Division of Oncology. So I work with medical doctors, and I'm just super motivated whenever I get a chance to speak to someone in that profession. So let me share something about Dr. Fred Moss, and then we're going to turn him loose and let him share some things about his area of expertise. Uniquely, Dr. Fred Moss was a college dropout who found a job at a state mental health facility for adolescent boys. However, he didn't like how these kids were treated and decided to do something about it. So he returned to college, and as the saying goes, the rest is history. Dr. Fred Moss is a pioneer psychiatrist and the founder of Welcome to Humanity. I like that. With nearly 4 decades of experience in the field, Dr. Moss has dedicated his career to uh, transforming the conversation around mental health. And that's what we talk about very often here on the Underground Subway, and well-being. Educated at Northwestern University Medical School and board certified in psychiatry, he has treated over 30,000 patients across various settings, including telepsychiatry and private practice and correctional health care. He's best known for his unconventional approach to psychiatry, which emphasizes holistic healing through communication, connection, creativity, and self expression. He challenges the traditional reliance on psychiatric diagnosis and medication, advocating instead for human centered and empathetic methods. He deals with something called in his creative eight methodology, and maybe we'll get into that, which activates live music, art, writing, and gardening as therapeutic practices in his true voice methodology, which assists people in finding their authentic voice through unconventional means and becoming comfortable speaking inauthentically as a form of self-expression. He has an extensive bio. We can be on here for hours talking about him, and I'm going to let him express himself and talk to us. And I want to welcome to the Underground Subway, Dr. Fred Moss. Sir, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join the Underground Subway.
It's just great to be here. Thank you for having me, David. And I appreciate the illustrative introduction. Everything you said is true, except I have actually over 4 decades, not almost 4 decades in the field.
Wow.
All right. So I've been in the field for right now about 45 years now. I started that
Wow.
job as a child care worker in January of 1980. And if you can do the math, that's about 44 and 44 and 3/4 years ago. And I'm really just a glorified childcare worker. In the end, like you mentioned, what really happened, I dropped out of school that second time and went back. I was just always, from a very young child, super interested in communication. I've later learned that we all are, and that's the whole point of a podcast, right? We're interested in connecting with each other. The reason you would have any guests on is you hope for a connection. The reason anyone would listen is that they would hope to be connected to your connection to the other person. It's always about human connection, and in the end, if you're going to heal anybody with any condition whatsoever, with any kind of imbalance or any kind of dysfunction or any kind of sore, or any kind of dis-ease, any kind of any kind of sub-optimized living, as you've spoken to, you're going to have to do that through healing, through connection, through human connection. And that's where love arises. And that's also where true healing arises. So, when you step in as a child, when I stepped in as a childcare worker, it was because college did not serve me to teach me how to communicate. We all know that in the Western world, when you go to school, you're really told to sit down, be quiet, and practice whatever the teacher does and do it as well as they do it. And you get to then pass into the next grade. It's not a place for open discourse and communication at all in the conventional educational system. Now, so that's why I left the second time. I tried twice and I left the second time. My mom told me that I had to get a job. I was like, mom. Anyways, mom wanted me to get a job, right? And so she got me an application. I lived in Detroit at the time. That's where I grew up. And she got me an application for a state mental health facility. And that's where I got to be a childcare worker. And I actually loved that job. It was an opportunity to communicate and help these kids who weren't really kids, after all. They're just people 6 or 7 years younger than me, learn how to negotiate and navigate this very challenging world. And the way I would do that is I would listen, and then I would self-express, and then I would communicate, and then I would align, and then I would, do what I could to provide and be of service. I would do all the things that the Moss method is now built on. This idea of having gratitude, this idea of being of service, of carrying on with with nature, or being a creative, as you mentioned, the creative 8: art, music, dancing, singing, drama, cooking, writing, gardening, which I outline in my book called The Creative 8. And then many other aspects. There are 20 things in the Moss method that are non-intrusive, non-diagnostic, non-medicine related interventions that really indeed promote and in fact actually cause healing if we take them on. By the way, for your listeners, you do not have to have a degree to be able to do this. And you also don't need to be sick in order to benefit from this. This is just called humanity. And that's why we have the brand name, which I'm very proud of. It seems like it's growing into the fabric very well over the last 6 or 7 years since I designed it, which is Welcome to Humanity. And Welcome to Humanity really takes into consideration this whole gizmo, like this whole dance that we're having, including the ultra terrible, including the unspeakable, the treacherous, the traumatic, as well as the ecstatic, the miraculous, the amazing, the beautiful. All of that is part of humanity. And that's what we get to deal with day after day. It's very confusing out here, right? It's very stimulating and it's very disturbing. And it's not more disturbing than it's ever been. If you read the masters, if you go back and look at the people who've been writing about life for thousands of years, or people who, I guess nobody's been writing for thousands of years, but the people from thousands of years ago who were writing, you'll see that they were talking about misery too. If you look at Buddha, for instance, he sat underneath that tree, figured out nearly all of life, right? I mean, that's why we're curious about the guy. Like he figured it out, and then he wrote it down, and then he shared it. But the one thing he didn't figure out was that life is miserable. He actually came up with that we have to deal with misery is one of his outcomes. Can you imagine Buddha kind of finding peace and freedom and power under that tree, like figuring out a whole thing, and then at one point deciding, I guess this one's going to stay. I guess I'm not going to work this one out. I guess misery is, in fact, part of life. That's what he had to do before he got up off that tree.
Wow.
He had to get to, okay, this one's irreconcilable. I'm going to have to hang with this one. And that's how we've learned over time that we get to deal with misery and pain. And we get to deal with misery and pain. And not like we have to, not like it's like a bad thing. It's just part of this whole experience of life. This philosophy, which isn't very weird after all, when you listen to it, you're not like, oh, that's wrong. No, it's not. There's nothing wrong about what I'm saying. We've all known this since we were here. And what we didn't know is that, people want to be diagnosed with conditions. So for your listeners, for those of you who already have a psychiatrist and you already have a treatment plan, you already have a diagnosis, you already taken medications, you already have, a therapy that's in place and you really love it, like you wouldn't trade it for the world. It's the best thing that's ever happened to you because there are people like that. Then please stay on track. Under no condition should you have this discussion disrupt you at all. Please, I mean it. This is not for you. You can even turn off the podcast right now if you want. It's no problem. But for the hundreds of millions of people who don't have that going on, who actually think there's something wrong with them, or they're misunderstood or misdiagnosed or mistreated or undertreated or overtreated or overdiagnosed or underdiagnosed or whatever. Okay, I hear you. You came in, you wanted to see what was wrong, or because you knew something was wrong. After all, you thought something was wrong. That's the whole point of coming to a psychiatrist, is thinking that there's something wrong. It's so interesting, David. A subspecialty like psychiatry is the only subspecialty in all of medicine that if I, as a doctor, tell you that you're okay, you get pissed.
Wow. Explain that. Explain that.
What I'm saying is that people come in knowing there's something wrong. They want to walk away with a diagnosis and a treatment plan. They're not coming in to ask if there's something wrong with me, typically. They're coming to say, I have something wrong and I need you to confirm it. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm nervous. I'm afraid. I'm awkward. I don't meet my deadlines. I'm yell at my wife too much. I don't take care for my basic needs. I watch too much porn. I am, I know how to be mean. I'm impulsive. My thoughts race. They say stuff like that. I'm like, don't want to live anymore. And they think that point that there is something inherently wrong with them. And they want to come in and get an alphabet soup type of diagnosis so we can actually categorize it and take away the responsibility of life that they have just by dealing with all of those things. Because after all, we all know what all those things are. If we're honest with ourselves, we know that we get to the end of our rope. We know that we get terrified. We know that we get anxious. We get depressed. We get scared. We even hear voices, by the way, but we call it intuition. And so in psychiatry, people want to walk away from the psychiatrist with some sort of diagnosis that relinquishes them from the responsibility of taking care of their life. Now, look, I'm not saying it's their fault. I'm saying that life is clumsy. It's very difficult to be alive. I get it. It's super challenging. There are obstacles, there are hurdles, there are challenges everywhere. And if you're having difficulty dealing with life, you know what I have to say to that? Welcome to humanity. The same thing. It's it's difficult. And there may be nothing wrong with you.
But do people want, you mentioned that, do people want you to fix it, or do they want you to say, yes, there is something wrong with you?
That's a really good question. They would love supposedly to have me fix it. But in truth, what they really want is there is something wrong with you and I can explain it. And here's the criteria. And if you look it up, you'll see there's nothing out of the ordinary. You're like, oh, I have racing thoughts, and my thoughts go too fast sometimes, and I'm impulsive other times, and I yell too fast, and I shop too much, or I believe too much in God, or I like sex too much. Oh, I must have bipolar. And then they walk away knowing that they have bipolar. And then they're kind of pleased and happy that they have found something that explains all their weirdnesses.
Which makes it okay to be like this.
Almost. It's okay not to be okay is kind of what you're saying.
Right,
exactly.
Right.
So people want that. They claim that they want to be fixed, but I have a method to fix them, and they don't really necessarily eagerly want to pursue that. The method to fix them is to get that there may have been nothing wrong with you in the first place. For real. There you go.
Well, let me ask you this, Doc. Years ago, I went to the doctor and I was diagnosed with, I was overweight, and I was diagnosed with,
for sure.
I was, I was overweight, and Since then, I've lost 50, 60 pounds. I was overweight.
Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. And I was diagnosed with high blood pressure,
All right.
and the doctor placed me on medication. And I asked this weird question. I said, now, how long am I going to be on this medication
Yeah.
before it's fixed,
Yeah.
before the medication removes? And the
Yeah.
doctor said, well, first of all, the high blood pressure could be
Doesn't
just
get there.
hereditary.
Exactly.
And she said, but medication doesn't fix it. It just
Exactly.
controls it.
No,
My
it doesn't
question
even do
is,
that. It doesn't even do that. I wish that's what it did, but it doesn't even do that.
well, my question is, in listening to your Super 8, how important
Creative.
or how yeah, I'm sorry. How
Super 8's a hotel.
yeah,
We
it's
have
a
been there.
hotel. It
Yeah.
must be getting close to the weekend. I'm sorry. I need a vacation. How how much of a weight should we put on medication for
Yeah.
mental health? Is it necessary? And if
Okay.
so, how much?
All right. Yeah, it's a great question. So, look, I've been dealing with the reason I went into psychiatry was the what I had noticed is that psychiatry was taking a turn towards being a medication industry, and that was when I was in childcare worker. You know, I hated psychiatry. That's why I went into it.
Mhm,
And what I'm saying is, I watched a psychiatrist deal with Johnny or Joe, Timmy or Tony, and
mhm,
they would be having some fights in the morning, in the evening, or they didn't go to bed on time. We'd call the psychiatrist. He'd come down. He'd talk to Tony for like 3 seconds, talk to us for like 7 seconds, and he'd go into nursing station, write something out. We'd have to go retrieve Tony and hold him down in the quiet room, pull down his sweatpants a little bit, and jam him full of some injectable cocktail that would put him into a stupor. Don't fool him. Look, that's still happening. That's already happened
I've
hundreds of
been
times
there. I
today.
worked in that. I worked in education for 20 years in special needs with behavior. Yeah,
Exactly.
so I've
It's
been there.
already
Yeah.
happened hundreds of times in this country this morning.
Yes. Yes.
It's
And it's
happened already.
heartbreaking.
It's happening right
Yes.
now.
Yes.
So don't fool yourself that that's the ancient times when Fred used to
Yes.
be a child care
Yes.
worker. No, man, that's still happening all the time.
Yes.
And I didn't appreciate that. I thought that was barbaric treatment. So that's when I came back to school a third time and really decided that I bring communication into the field and actually inject that form. It's been difficult to do that because, in fact, when I came out of school, when I was in school, Prozac was introduced to the world. And Prozac changed the world drastically. Prozac fundamentally changed the way we look at all mental illness, because when Prozac came, that's when the whole idea of biological psychiatry, the whole idea of chemical imbalance causing discomfort was initiated. Now, look, we don't blame a log for burning in a fire. That's what a log does. A log
Right.
burns in a fire. That's what a log does.
Mhm.
But we blame ourselves for being uncomfortable in a very uncomfortable world. We think that if we're uncomfortable, there must be something wrong with us. Not at all. Not at
Right.
all, dude.
Mhm.
If you're uncomfortable in this world, what do I think I have to say? Same thing. Welcome to humanity. It's
Mhm.
really, really uncomfortable out here
Mhm.
sometimes. Totally okay. So when you can get that there's, what medications are, you said, you got some blood pressure medicine. Medications, they pretend, I wish that they would cure, but in fact, they just control. I wish that was true. It's not true. If all they did was control, I would have no problem medicating everyone.
Mhm.
But they're not. They're a Band-Aid with a razor blade inside of it.
Wow. Wow.
The medications actually induce, perpetuate, or frequently cause the symptoms they're marketed to treat. Can you imagine putting a Band-Aid with a razor blade on your cut? Here's what would happen. Your cut would be covered. You get it? Initially, you'd be like, okay, it's not bleeding anymore. And then a day or two later, blood would start oozing out the sides.
Wow.
And you would think your condition got worse.
Wow. Wow.
But when you start really realizing the diagnosis and then the treatments in the form of medications actually makes things worse. No kidding. Like for real. Like that they actually make things worse. They actually cause the symptoms they're marketed to treat. Now it's no longer control, is it? It's
Right.
control and worsening. What's
Right.
your only answer to a Band-Aid with a razor blade in it that you think the condition is getting worse and not caused by the Band-Aid? What's your only answer? Your only answer is to get a bigger freaking Band-Aid. That's what medications are all about.
Wow.
It's a great industry, dude. I wish you and I would.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Dude, my goodness, the profit margin of that industry is more than any industry in the history of the planet.
Yeah, pharmaceuticals and insurance.
And it's not even insurance. It's like really looking at if I could create a product that in its use perpetuated the need to use that product, that is a fantastic business model. I love
Yes.
it. Like it's super cool. And it creates the supply and demand inherently. So that's really great for the people who are looking for bottom line. It's not a problem with medications or the business model. The only problem with this whole thing that has an entryway is that if you come in thinking there's something wrong with you, this is where you'll get into.
Mhm.
So if you really want to stop the cycle, it has nothing to do with medicine or insurance or big pharma or doctors or the industry. It doesn't have to do with any of that.
Mhm.
It has to do with our need to know that there's something wrong with us, and then our belief that if we put something in our mouth, we can fix ourselves.
Mhm.
If we were to alter those two things, we can change the system,
Yeah.
at least for us individually, right? Oh, yeah, maybe there's nothing wrong with me. Maybe this super pain that I woke up with today because I'm miserable, because I can't stand the world, because I hate my life. Maybe that's something that happens to humans, and we have to find a way to counteract that. This is a little bit along the ways of what Buddha had to say. It's not like misery isn't everywhere, but choosing to be miserable is a choice.
Mhm. Uh,
And yeah,
we're running out of time. There's an older adage that says time flies when you're having fun.
yeah,
In the time we have left, you said something there that is triggering a question for me. Doc, how do we know? How do I know that I am mentally ill? Because
you're not.
especially in my generation,
You're
that
not.
term is
That's
okay.
how you
Talk
know.
about that. Talk
You're
about that.
not. There is nothing wrong with you. What if there is nothing wrong with you? What if you thinking there's something wrong with you is what's wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with that because we all think there's something wrong with us? What if it's
I like
entirely
that.
normal to think that there's something wrong with you and to realize that there is nothing wrong with you?
Wow.
What if, as
Amazing.
Krishnamurti said, Krishnamurti had a great quote. He said, there is no sign of mental health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. What if that's the case? What if we have a profoundly sick society and your difficulty in managing it has nothing to do with you?
Wow.
Wouldn't that be just great? Like, there's the freedom. You want to know if
Yes.
you're mentally ill? I got the answer for you. No, I don't even have to interview you.
I'm normal.
You're normal in your sense that you're abnormal. But what does that really mean? We don't even have a definition of normal. And we have
Right.
the audacity to think that we have the definition of abnormal. If we don't even know what normal is, how can we decide what isn't that?
But then on one hand, we we talk about how uniquely different we are. None of us have the same fingerprint. None of us have the same eye pattern, but yet we try to be quote unquote normal, right?
Yeah. What's really normal about us is that each and every one of us thinks that we're unique. That's a very normal trait. We're unique in the way idea. We think that we're unique, and that is a normal trait. We also think that we're sick and different because we compare our insides to everybody's outsides. But what if that's not the case? What if, for real, there was never anything wrong with you? All you're doing is stumbling, tumbling, and bumbling through this wild life. And what if really you're not as stuck as
Wow.
you think you are, and there's nothing wrong with you? And that's really what I have to say to your listeners. Just
Wow.
consider that possibility. If you're willing to consider that possibility, I'm willing to talk to anybody about that. And once you get this in place, life becomes much more free and powerful. This idea of making life better,
Mhm.
it's available,
All right.
but you have to first get there's nothing wrong with
Oh,
you and never was.
wow. How do we get in touch with you? How do we get our hands on your material?
Yeah, Dr. Fred, drfred360.com is a kind of condensed version of my website. And then the other one that is welcome to humanity.net. And that's where you can get my books. And I've been on 200 podcasts. You can listen to those. And I've had my own podcast. I've dropped 300 of my own podcasts. And then another place to find me is in my schoolroom, skool.com /welcome to humanity /about. And I'm inviting all like-minded people who really want to learn how to handle this crazy life in a way that actually works without getting a diagnosis or medication. That's where I'd like to send your people to come join my group and see what we can do together.
Sounds great. Well, Doc, thank you so much for taking time. Well, my friends, the train on the Underground Subway is pulling into the station, and I want to thank you for joining us. I want to give a special thank you to Dr. Fred Moss for joining us today on this edition of the Underground Subway. We're pulling into the station here on Purpose Boulevard and Destiny Avenue, and I want to thank you for spending time on this ride. This was so enjoyable. I got so much powerful information. I want you to do a couple of things for me. Share this, like it, send it to a friend. Again, I want to thank Dr. Moss for joining us. We're out of time, but this train will be running again shortly. And I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join the Underground Subway. As we prepare to go, I want to challenge you as we leave today. I want to challenge you before you go to bed tonight. I want to issue a challenge. Find a mirror. Look yourself in the face, eyeball to eyeball, and ask yourself this question. Today, did I do something to make this world a better place? Did I do something to make my life better? Or did I waste another day? We've got no more time to waste. Live on purpose. Have a wonderful day today and an even better day tomorrow. I appreciate you, and there's nothing you can do about it. We'll see you next time right here on the Underground Subway.